If you break an arm, you look at a medical x-ray, it's binary, it's clean.
Right. The doctor can just point to a jagged white line and definitively say, there's the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you're the kind of reader who loves plunging into complex, deeply layered, dark fantasy worlds, you know that severe psychological trauma doesn't come with a diagnostic scan.
No, it really doesn't.
There's no machine that can peer into a fractured mind and map out exactly where a delusion ends and, reality begins.
Which is terrifying.
It is. And that murky, terrifying landscape is exactly where we are heading today. Whether you're a hardcore sci-fi and fantasy aficionado dissecting lore, or you're just insanely curious about world building that pushes characters to their absolute limits, we have custom-tailored this deep dive specifically for you.
Yeah, we are jumping into the post-cataclysmic dark fantasy novel San Vitae, The Awakening by D.P. Kirk.
And our mission today is to basically give you a reader's guide to the complex lore of this universe, right? We're going to do that by zeroing in on one pivotal section, which is chapter 16, titled Broodlings.
Such a great chapter.
It really is. We're going to review its quality, break down the mechanics of its action, and use the broader context of the whole book to pull out the most fascinating details.
Because we want to show you exactly why this blend of, brutal blood magic, psychological horror, and surprisingly witty banter makes for a story you should be getting incredibly excited about.
So to really appreciate the stakes of Broodlings, you need a quick grounding in the mechanics of the wastes. Dropping into chapter 16 blindly is a recipe for total disorientation.
Oh, yeah. The source material here is dense. It's unforgiving, but it's so deeply rewarding. The entire foundation of this universe is built upon a historical cataclysm called the Heaven's Scar.
Which is just a great name.
It's so evocative. It was this literal catastrophic rift in the sky that rained down ash and fundamentally altered the biosphere. And it unlocks something called Vitae.
Right. Let's look at the mechanics of that, because Vitae isn't just your generic wave a wand magic system.
No, not at all.
It's a biological light source energy. It's visceral. It takes a massive physical toll, and it's basically a central currency of power in this world.
Exactly. It dictates the entire societal structure. The wastes have splintered into these warring ideological factions based entirely on their relationship to this energy.
So at the top, you have the Santerrie.
Right, the elite blood magic users who wield Vitae with just terrifying precision, and opposing them are the Humanis La Luna.
The purists.
The rigid purists, yeah. They view Vitae as a demonic taint, and they dedicate themselves to violently eradicating anyone who has it.
And then caught in the crossfire is the New Covenant.
Right, the New Covenant is this highly militaristic, human-centric faction. They're just trying to carve out dominance through technology and sheer brutal subjugation.
Wait, so if the factions are that strictly divided between elite magic users, purist zealots, and a militarized army, where does our protagonist actually fit in?
Kurien. Well, he occupies the most dangerous ground imaginable. Originally, he was what they call a San Vitae, which is a conscripted magic user-bound body and soul to a powerful Covenness named Myasuchi.
Okay.
But trauma forces adaptation. So through a series of horrific events, Kurien has actually evolved from a standard San Vitae into something far rarer. He's a Sanite.
Now, the book makes a massive distinction between those two terms.
Yeah.
How does that evolution actually work, on a physiological level?
So think of a standard San Vitae as a controlled electrical circuit. They can channel energy safely within certain parameters, right?
Right, have limits.
Exactly. But a Sanite is what happens when extreme physical and psychological trauma overloads that circuit. It literally melts the internal limiters.
Wow.
So the result is an individual with this latent, raw, almost primal connection to the deepest aspects of Vitae. They are exponentially more powerful, but they also become wildly unstable.
Which makes them prime targets for factions looking to weaponize them. And that perfectly explains why he was targeted by the New Covenant. They captured him and locked him in this subterranean torture vault for 12 years.
12 years of agony.
Yeah, and this is where the psychological horror truly begins. Because the human brain can only process so much pain before it just shuts down the incoming data stream to protect itself.
It has to, or you just die of shock.
Right. So Kurien's brain literally built a 12-year sandbox simulation just to keep him from going utterly mad.
It's a dissociative fugue state on an unprecedented scale. I mean, his mind fabricated an entire alternate timeline where he actually escaped the vault years ago.
So sad.
It really is. In this deeply detailed hallucination, he reunited with his beloved Myasuchi. They got married. They had a son named Han.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he experienced all the daily, mundane joys of fatherhood and love for over a decade, all in his head.
It's just devastating. Because right before Chapter 16 begins, he gets physically rescued from the vault alongside another tortured Sanite named Sharina. And the moment he breathes free air, the walls of his psychological sanctuary just crumble. He realizes his wife, his 12-year marriage, his 2-year-old son, none of it was real.
He's mourning a family that never existed outside his own fractured mind, and this fragility is the lens through which we have to look at Broodlings.
Totally.
Because Kurien is not your standard stoic action hero. His reality is inherently unreliable. The author demands that you, as the reader, track not only the external threats, but the internal collapse of this guy.
And that mental collapse slams right into physical reality as we open the chapter. The transition is violent. Kurien is jolted awake in a ruined building by a horrifying nightmare.
Yeah, he dreams that Myasuchi and her twin sister Rikuko are being tortured by new Covenant soldiers.
And the core terror of that dream is his own guilt. He genuinely believes his very existence as a Sanite brings pain to everyone he loves.
Which is, a textbook manifestation of survivor's guilt, amplified by the fresh grief of his shattered delusion. But D.P. Kirk doesn't give him or the reader time to process that grief.
No, because the environment demands immediate survival. The ruins are crawling with anti-sand.
The drones.
Right, these mindless, reanimated drones creeping through the architecture, driven by this parasitic lust for vitae. They ambush Kurien and Sharina in the dark.
It's a great setup.
It is, but I have to push back a little here on the genre tropes. We are in a media landscape utterly saturated with zombie hordes, right?
Oh, absolutely. The undead trope is everywhere.
So what makes these anti-sand drones genuinely compelling to read about, rather than just another generic zombie fight?
That is the defining question. And the quality of Kirk's writing shines here not because the monsters themselves are a profound reinvention of the wheel, but because the combat mechanics are masterfully executed.
Okay, how so?
It's an exploration of applied physics fueled by a biological sacrifice. The choreography is just incredible.
Right, because Kurien doesn't just swing a sword. He uses brute force physics transformations, morphing his hands into metallic claws, and combines that with teleportation, which the lore calls link steps.
And blink stepping is not some clean, spuckly magic trick. It's described as a violent folding of space that takes an immense physical toll.
There's that one sequence that's just insane.
Where he grabs the 2 drones.
Yes. He grabs 2 of these anti-sand drones, blink steps out of a multi-story window, contorts his body midair to maximize his mass and velocity, and lands on them with such force that his heel physically crushes them.
He creates a crater in the rubble.
Exactly. Kurien is the kinetic payload. Crushing, breaking, dropping from the sky like an anvil. But Sharina is fighting right beside him, and she acts like the thermal detonator.
Yeah, alone they're dangerous, but combined they trigger an absolute chain reaction. Sharina operates as an evoker.
So she isn't transforming her body like he is.
Right, she's manipulating pure thermal and kinetic energy. She creates a plasma blade from her daggers, which is tethered to her body by a physical cord. She's actually drawing on her own physiological reserves to sustain a localized thermal reaction. So while Kurien is tossing enemies around, she sends a surge of power down that tether, creating a controlled plasma explosion that instantaneously disintegrates every drone within a 6-meter radius.
She turns the alleyway into a blast furnace. And immediately after she vaporizes a dozen monsters, the tension breaks with my absolute favorite aspect of their dynamic, which is the banter.
Oh, the banter is so good.
Mid-slaughter, Sharina calls him Tiger, and Kurien fires back, calling her a scary pixie.
It's really easy to dismiss banter during an action sequence as just like cheap comic relief.
Yeah.
But we have to analyze it through the lens of combat psychology.
Right.
When your amygdala is screaming in sheer panic, tossing out a flippant nickname forces the higher cognitive functions of your brain to stay engaged. It's a neurological grounding mechanism.
That makes total sense. It prevents tunnel vision.
Exactly. And it actually explains the mechanics of their blood bond perfectly. Earlier, they accidentally mixed their open wounds and their vitae. Their souls basically fused.
So they don't just fight well together, they fight as a single predatory organism.
And you see that synergy through dermal contact. The text details how, when Kurien needs more power to breach an Antizan's armor, he physically feels Sharina channel her evoker energy directly into his metallic claws.
Superheating them until they glow with that lavender energy.
You don't even need to speak. Their nervous systems are just reading and reacting to each other in real time.
Okay, so you have this adrenaline-fueled carnage drones being crushed, sliced, vaporized, but you cannot maintain a narrative fever pitch indefinitely. The reader just gets exhausted.
Right, the heart gives out.
Exactly. The true quality of the thriller is often measured by how it handles the emotional downregulation after a spike in violence.
And Kirk recognizes that necessity. They realize these drones are merely the scouts, the Broodlings, which implies a puppeteer is orchestrating the swarm.
So they have to retreat.
Yeah, they descend into an abandoned, darkened cellar to catch their breath.
And this descent into the cellar is brilliant character work. The adrenaline is fading, reality is settling back in, and Kurien, despite the trauma, the missing memories, the blood, he tries to be a little suave.
It's so awkward.
It is. He spots some dusty wine bottles on a shelf, holds them up with the labels facing Sharina, and attempts this moment of classic, roguish charm.
And Sharina's response just perfectly encapsulates her character. She spent years as a subjugated captive, so she is fiercely blunt. She's reclaiming her autonomy.
Right.
She sneers at the wine, flatly states, "I don't drink," completely ignores his attempt at charm, and just grabs the hard liquor from a different shelf.
It is genuinely funny. But it pivots immediately into this deeply melancholic internal monologue. Kurien reflects on being shot down, and he refers to his inner self as a dirty little teenager rattling his cage.
That phrase, dirty little teenager, is the key to understanding his entire psychological profile. We have to remember the timeline here.
Right. He went in as a young man.
Exactly. The New Covenant locked him in that vault when he was basically a kid. For over a decade, his physical body aged, enduring unimaginable torment, but his social and emotional development was entirely frozen.
He was robbed of all those formative, awkward years where you learn how to date, how to handle rejection.
Precisely. Emotionally speaking, a significant part of his psyche remains a stunted teenager trying to navigate adult interactions.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. Kirk balances the extreme body horror and the intense PTSD with these incredibly raw, uniquely human moments. It strips away the fantastical elements and reminds you that beneath the glowing claws, Kurien is just a profoundly broken guy who doesn't know how to talk to a woman he likes.
Which forces you to root for him on a much deeper level. You see the massive deficit in his life, and you just want him to find a sliver of normalcy.
But normalcy does not exist in the wastes.
No, it doesn't. And the chapter's ending violently reminds us of that. The cellar scene ends on this startlingly awkward yet terrifying cliffhanger.
Right, they're fumbling in the gloom, and Kurien accidentally gropes Sharina.
She gasps his name, utterly bewildered. But before the awkwardness can even register, before he can offer a panicked apology, he forcefully hushes her.
The environmental pressure shifts instantly.
He stares out into the darkness of the cellar, and he spots the lidless, dead black eyes of the puppeteer staring directly back at them.
The orchestrator of the swarm found them. It acts as an immediate propellant into Chapter 17, but it also serves as a gateway to the expanding mythology of the wider world.
Right, because looking at the broader context of San Vitae, this is not just a localized zombie survival story. The scope is massive. As the narrative expands, we're introduced to a looming global war.
Yeah, there's an ominous, illuminated spire that acts as a focal point. We see advanced aircraft launching missile strikes into ruined cities.
And there are those escalating rumors regarding the San Vitae.
Essentially the ancient gods of this universe, the original apex blood magic users who supposedly survived the Heaven's Scar centuries ago.
And the factions are terrified that they're waking up.
Yeah, preparing to walk the earth and impose their ancient will on society.
But, even with ancient gods and missile strikes, the most compelling conflict in the book isn't happening in the skies. It's happening entirely within Kurien's own mind. We have to talk about Lotus.
Oh, absolutely. Lotus represents one of the most fascinating narrative devices in modern dark fantasy.
So as his mind continues to fracture, strained by the vault, the false life, his new powers, this completely distinct persona begins to manifest.
Right, and Lotus is not merely a voice in his head. She is a dark, blossoming, fiercely powerful female persona. And crucially, she possesses the memories, mannerisms, and lethal protective instincts of his past loves.
Myasuchi and Rikuko.
Yes. She operates as an ultimate magical defense mechanism. When his conscious mind is pushed to the brink, Lotus takes the wheel.
But she doesn't just talk, she actively manipulates his magic.
Exactly. She speaks through his mouth, dictates his tactics, and sometimes acts in direct opposition to his conscious wishes to protect him from his own empathy.
It turns the whole novel into a psychological thriller with an unreliable narrator. You're constantly forced to question the data.
Like, what's actually happening in the physical world and what is a hallucination bleeding over?
Right. When he executes a brutal kill, was that the traumatized young man making a choice, or did Lotus hijack his nervous system?
The author challenges the reader to question reality at every turn. When he interacts with an ally, is his perception being warped by Lotus's hypervigilant threat assessment?
It elevates the source material so much. It's an exploration of identity and the terrifying power of memory.
Absolutely.
So synthesizing everything we've pulled from this deep dive, San Vitae, The Awakening demands your attention because it perfectly executes a difficult balancing act.
It delivers the visceral, highly kinetic action of blood magic combat, but grounds it in a deeply unsettling exploration of what profound trauma does to human development.
The physical scars are merely prologue to the psychological fractures. Every fight carries weight because you deeply understand the broken humanity behind the punches.
You show up for the plasma blades and the monstrous antizin, but you stay for the awkward banter and the heartbreaking monologues of a man who lost a family that only ever existed in his head.
It fundamentally questions the coping mechanisms we use when reality becomes too agonizing, which leaves us with a final, provocative thought for you to explore on your own.
It's a heavy one.
Think about Kurien's 12 years in that torture vault. To survive the daily destruction of his body, his mind engineered a flawless sanctuary. He experienced the genuine warmth of a marriage, the joy of raising a son.
A self-contained universe of salvation, constructed entirely out of delusion.
But then the vault door opens. He's physically rescued. The delusion shatters, and he's thrust back into a horrific, war-torn reality, forced to mourn phantoms designed to keep his heart beating.
Yeah.
So ask yourself, if you could live a full, beautiful, deeply fulfilling life entirely within the confines of a delusion, while your physical body suffered in the real world, would being rescued and waking up to the brutal truth actually be a salvation?
Or would waking up and losing that beautiful lie be the ultimate tragedy?
When the diagnostic scan of your life finally comes back clear, showing you that everything you loved was a hallucination, you really have to wonder if you're better off in the dark,